Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles constitutional and legal issues, bringing you information and analysis. My name is Dumile Matez. Remember, you can also be part of our discussion today by calling us on our studio line 011 7145497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. In Jeremiah 23, verse 16, the Bible says, "Do not listen to the words of the prophets who are prophesying to you. They are leading you into futility. They speak a vision of their own imagination, not from the mouth of the Lord." Strict regulations must be put in place to stop the commercialization of religion and abuse of people's belief systems. This is the view of the Commission for the Promotion and the Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities in its report on the commercialization of religion and abuse of people's belief systems. Today on Rights and Recourse, we examine the feasibility of the regulations for religion as espoused by the CRL Commission. The CRL Commission report released on Tuesday. There has been mixed response to the far-reaching recommendations in the report. But first, let's take a look at this insert.
Dubious religious practices, self-styled prophets, gullible and vulnerable believers, questionable and risky rituals. It spurred the CRL Rights Commission into action.
What we saw on that day on television.
Countrywide hearings were held.
A person will jump on him today, tomorrow he has a job.
And finally, its recommendations on regulation. All churches to be registered and licensed, stringent vetting for foreign religious leaders, incomes to be declared and taxed.
This commission will not succeed to close down Christianity.
It sparked fury and resistance among some.
Zangomas don't pay tax. They commissioners, they are Zangomas. They are Kobelas. They train people to be Zangomas. They take money. Why don't they set a good example with that? Who is regulating them?
But the commission remains undeterred.
If everything we're proposing is implemented, Parliament capacitates us to do this through legislation, through financing. We are completely sure it will stop abruptly, and all the bad elements will be removed by their peers from the system.
It's going to take time.
Others support the regularization route.
Most of these people don't belong anywhere. They'll take the finances, put it in a sack, put it in the trunk of the car and go home with it.
But there are still demands.
One, separation between church and state. The other was the protection of doctrine. The other, the autonomy of the local church. The other, the freedom of speech, as long as it's not hate speech.
My advice to the Commission would be, we don't think this thing should be steamrolled. We understand that there's pressure of time, but the religious community is a very diverse community in South Africa. And therefore, we should be given enough time to discuss these matters.
The focus now shifts to Parliament to act on the recommendations. Mariketa Mutlabe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
While Marikeka Mutlabi there, one of our reporters putting together that report. Thank you very much. To discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by Ms. Tokom Kwanazikaluva, Chairperson of the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural and Linguistic Communities. And from our Cape Town studio, we are joined by Mr. Michael Swain, Executive Director from Freedom of Religion, South Africa. And later on, we will be joined by Brigadier Hangwani Mulaudzi on the phone, spokesperson for the Hawks, and Ms. Satoko Mahlangu, who is a victim of harassment by one of the pastors. Ma'am, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Good afternoon and thanks for having us.
Good afternoon, Michael, down in Cape Town.
Good afternoon, and thank you also for having me on the show.
The question I want to start with you, ma'am. Let us start with you. What is the mandate of the Commission, and what has prompted this report, this investigation into religion in South Africa?
I'll give you the broad mandate. is to promote and protect the rights of cultural, religious, and linguistic communities. Basically what it means is that we need to look at how we defend those rights of those communities, but also how we promote them so that those communities can enjoy, their culture, be able to speak their language freely, and be able to, enjoy their religion any way they see fit, but within the Bill of Rights.
Michael, let me come to you. Do you support the role that is played by the Commission?
I absolutely support the role that's played by the Commission. They are a Chapter 9 institution, an institution of the state, and they were set up specifically to give that, if you like, additional layer of protection to, among other things, religious rights and freedoms. So we absolutely support them as an institution. Where I believe we differ in this matter is simply this. We fully support the fact that they have investigated and they have highlighted some of these serious abuses that are taking place, where actual harm is taking place and harm is being done, perpetrated, if you like. But where we differ from them is, of course, in the solution. Their solution is to license every religious practitioner and place of worship. And we believe that that is something that is unnecessary, unworkable, and unconstitutional.
Let us come back to an issue here, ma'am, and that is the issue of what prompted the investigation.
What prompted us was what was happening in the country. There had been many reports in the media, but we had also received a lot of complaints from congregants who were complaining about how they were being financially abused by their pastors, how they had invested money.
Like if you want to see the pastors, you must give them 5,000 rand.
Yes, for an audience. Some of them go as high as 17,000 for an audience, for a prayer. But also there were serious allegations around the selling of products, faith products. And these faith products were then encroaching onto the medical care of patients. If we are on chronic medication, and your pastor tells you all you need to do is to pray, fast, and drink my faith water, you don't need this chronic medication of yours, whether for HIV and AIDS, especially for older persons, high blood pressure, diabetes, and those types of diseases. Some families reported that their loved ones have died, or the worst case scenario, they were in the process of dying. And these pastors had not broken any laws in the country. It's a moral dilemma as opposed to a criminal dilemma. We looked at all the laws that exist to say, how do we protect people? What charges can we lay? And you see, when your mother who believes in this thing and she's faithfully practicing it, you can't go to the police station. It's not a place you go to. And what then prompted us to get here was that we need a vigorous change in the system to protect congregants and to protect the vulnerable and gullible communities out there, from people who are preying on their beliefs, from people who want to cash in on the money they don't even have, and all those other things. Because most of the time, the laws that deal with criminals can't deal with them because they're not committing any crime, really. It's a moral crime that they're committing. And at the police station, that doesn't work.
Madam Chair, I want to believe the Commission did, I picked up that the Commission did just wake up and did the investigation. You actually had an investigative study done by the UNISA Bureau for Market Research. And is it this study that actually said there should be an investigation?
You see, we then said there's something happening out there. We need expertise. We need independent people so that we're not tainted by, you started out knowing this is what you wanted anyway. We then went to an independent group at UNISA and said, look at this thing for us. Tell us what is at play here. Why are people so vulnerable? Why are people behaving in this way? How come pastors have so much power over them? Why are they controlling people's minds to this level? And what else might happen? Is there a controlling factor or is there nothing happening? They came back to us and said, actually, we've got a much bigger problem than you think. These people's minds have been taken away. If there's any capture that has happened, it's the capture of the minds of the congregants.
Michael, I know you belong to Freedom of Religion South Africa, but there's something in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa that says a right, even though we have the rights are not absolute.
That is absolutely correct. And we obviously are looking here primarily at the right of freedom of religion. What we are basically saying, though, is that if you want to come and regulate religion, if you want to license people to practice religion or to be banned from practicing religion, we have to tread very, very carefully, because inevitably what happens is that you start to get into the area of the evaluation, which is something which the CRL report actually states, of the acceptability of religious doctrine. And as soon as you start to examine religious doctrine, you're treading on very dangerous ground. Now, let me reaffirm that there is absolutely nothing that should be done or must be done to cover up any form of criminal or fraudulent or any other dangerous activity by saying this is now done in the name of religion. This is now something that God told me to do. That is unacceptable. That is why we have laws in this country. And every single issue that the CRL Rights Commission's report identified can be dealt with by existing laws. And that's why we're saying that is surely the first recourse. Before you go and regulate from top to bottom the entire religious community of South Africa, let's look at exactly what's happening and let's work together to make sure that these abuses are dealt with. But primarily, one of the main ways you deal with criminal activity is very simple. You deal with it using the existing laws and the law enforcement agencies.
Did you make a submission to the Commission?
Yes, we did. We made a 67-page submission, which we made together with the South African Charter for Religious Freedoms. So we looked at this very much from a legal point of view, from an analytical point of view. We examined everything that the Commission had identified. We proposed alternative solutions, and we submitted this report. Incidentally, the constituency that we represent between ourselves and the South African Religious Rights Charter is 22 million people. I think one of our big concerns, of course, is that when we came to read the report that was released as the final report, we could see that almost none of our recommendations, none of our submissions and none of our concerns had been properly addressed. And the Commission also, for some reason, did not actually engage with 4SA other than to invite us to one public meeting where I think we had about 2 minutes to make a presentation.
Madam Chair, is that the case?
Not really. You see, first and foremost, maybe we need to clarify the issue of, they're saying they've got membership of 22 million because people have endorsed the charter. The CRL Rights Commission is one of the people who have endorsed the charter. Anyway, so they can't represent our interests. There are lots of other people that we've spoken to who say they support the proposals of the CRL Commission. So the 22 million, they should not come up with a number. And basically, have they spoken to the congregants and not the pastors and reverends? We took our time and asked UNISA to speak to the congregants because those are the victims. You can't be talking to people who are leaders and then you say, because in your church you've got 5 million and I've got a deal with you, it means I now represent your 5 million who are victims of your activities. It doesn't make sense to us. And secondly, even in our report, we responded to each and every issue they raised. It's in the report. Part of it was that we must have an ombuds. The other issue was that there are enough laws in this country. We have been to the police. We have been to the NPA. They say there aren't laws to deal with the exploitation of people because they are not breaking any laws.
I would have thought, Michael, if you have an organization that is countrywide, you actually set the rules and see to it whoever is your member follows those rules, acceptable rules, as per our constitution.
Well, I think it's important that you've just mentioned is that the whole religious community does operate within the regulatory framework of the laws and the Constitution of South Africa. And therefore, the religious community is not an unregulated community by any manner of means. We all have to abide by the laws of the land. Secondly, there are obviously a lot of situations which the different religious institutions, the different denominations will self-regulate, and the whole area of religion has historically in this country been self-regulated. Where we're seeing a major department, which the CRL's which the CRL's report is indicating, is that they now want to turn this situation on its head, and effectively what we will end up will be state regulation of religion. And that is a very concerning thing, and that is certainly something which we believe is unconstitutional.
But one would imagine, Michael, I'm sorry to be belaboring the point, that an organization like yours will put strict regulations for churches to follow, and you know what are the things that have been spoken about that these churches have been doing around South Africa. Do you agree that these things are right? They should be done?
Just to correct one thing very importantly, and that is that Freedom of Religion South Africa, we are not a regulatory body. We are essentially an organisation which looks to protect and promote religious freedom in South Africa. So when we see what we believe is to be an infringement or an encroachment of these religious freedoms, particularly with the level of state intervention and interference that this proposal will entail, then we examine it in terms of the Constitution, we examine it in terms of the legal framework, the existing historic position of religion and the state in South Africa, and we then, of course, look at the issues and the problems which the CRL has identified and see, are there alternative solutions to these very issues? And our contention is absolutely there are. We, for example, the CRL chairlady has just said that they rejected the idea of an ombudsman. We were simply saying this, that if you look at the CRL Act, one of the things that they have the power to do is to alert any relevant state authority to investigate and to take action if something illegal or wrong is reported to them. We are saying, why not set up a rapid response unit within the CRL so that that can quickly deal with these issues? Because there's no point filming them on television and making a big fuss about things unless they're actually dealt with. And no pastor, whatever you call yourself, has the right to harm and hurt other people. But when the laws are properly enforced, then we will see this kind of thing coming, we believe, to an abrupt halt. And that's what we're looking for.
Well, if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights and Recourse. Alternatively, you can email your thoughts to Rights and Recourse at sabc.co.za. I hear Michael talking about there must be a rapid response system from the CRL, and earlier he spoke about the churches must be self-regulating, two things in one. We'll be back after the break.
We live with this threat of violence. This is a strange and weird thing, if you come to think of it. So we don't live in a society, which is where the question leads me. We want to live in a society where we trust that we will not be violated.
A man abducted her from a taxi rank in Baragwanath.
He would have taken me and killed me. He would have shot me while I was running, you know. But none of those things happened. And, you know, even if I didn't believe in God, like, this is a real miracle.
How does the police unit of family violence follow new crime trends?
Station crime intelligence will from time to time present the crime pattern analysis and the crime threat analysis. We respond to those.
For all investigative insights, stay tuned to Special Assignment every Saturday at 17:30.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need. failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we discuss the CRL report on the commercialization of religion. And we are now joined by Ms. Satoko, who is one of the victims who were pushed around by some pastor in Yeovil. Satoko, if you could tell us briefly, what happened in the story I know was in one of our sister programs, Cutting Edge. And what happened between you and the residents of this place and the pastor?
All right. It all started last year, September. First of all, I just would like to mention what kind of place I've been living. The building where I stay is in Yeovil, a sectional title building. It has got 20 different flats, and each owner is different. And one of the flats was bought by a Congolese pastor. His name is Pastor Elijah, and he started demolishing all the walls in the flat. And at the same time, he started church activities in the midst of a residential building.
In other words, he disregarded all bylaws by the city?
No, he disregarded everything.
Disregarded your freedom and the freedom of other people and just did what he wanted to do?
Exactly.
Apparently you were threatened physically by the pastor.
Not exactly physically, but verbally. It was about 6 months ago. The noise was especially too much on that morning, Sunday. So I decided to go to the church inside. Then when I stepped into the church and first I tried to introduce myself politely. Then before I finished everything in my self-introduction, a few men came to me, grabbed my body, and I was pushed out. Then a few hours after that, the pastor himself came to the front of my door, and he shouted and screamed at me, and he said he would deal with me, he would kill me, and everything, you name it. So I had to go to Yeovil police station and open a case against him for the intimidation.
Well, those are just some of the reports that come in about what pastors do around us. And Michael, before we come down to you and the chairperson here, I just want to go to a caller on the line, Mr. Chabalala from Johannesburg. Mr. Chabalala, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Yes, I want to give an access.
Kunjan Bao.
Uyabona inkinga yokuthi lapho uthi abantu bayahlukunyezwa emasontweni mari mangithi ngiyabheka nabantu okudlalwa ngabo emasontweni abafundi abanye amadoda abantu abalapho emasontweni abanye amaloya abafundi abantu abalapho abanye bafunde kundlula yena u-CRL what bayakhona but always makhulu kuthiwa abafundisi badlala ngengqondo zabantu but mangithi ngiyabheka mina abantu sinokuya emasontweni sithola amadoda lapha esontweni lapho sithola nawo lamaphoyisa lawa athaze uzaya ku ayaya esontweni kukhona nokuyiminister eparliament bekaya esontweni kaZondo lethi kanje nangama-election bayaya kuyo lamasonto lawo labantu makuzoza ama-election siyababona lapha emasontweni. So
Thank you, Abu Chalala. Mr. Chalala is saying the people who go, in essence, he is saying, I hope, Michael, you can hear me down in Cape Town. In essence, he is saying the people who go to these churches are well endowed, they are doctors, they are educated, they can make up their own minds, they don't need to be told by a CRL Commission, no, don't go to church, don't do this, don't do that. Therefore, they must make up their own minds and they cannot be told what to do.
You see, what we discovered in our investigation, especially when UNISA was working with the people on the ground, these things are several levels. There are class distinctions. You see, where the worst abuse is happening, it's with people who are unemployed, poor, and marginalized in terms of the difference between the haves and the have-nots. So when we are marginalized to that level, the expectations from the pastor, they go as far down the food chain as you wish, to the point of affecting your human dignity, which is a constitutional right. Section 10 of the Constitution is very clear, and that's a non-derogable right. It's a complete right, and we're basing all our recommendations on protecting people's human dignity. And human dignity cannot be protected necessarily through a criminal justice system. Because when a pastor said, like you saw in your clip, if I jump on them today, tomorrow they get a job. Can you go lay a charge at the police station yourself when the willing participant is saying, let him jump on me, I'll come back tomorrow for him to jump on me? What Forza is failing to understand is that we're not talking criminal activity here. We're talking moral degradation in churches, where the pastor controls people's minds, where the pastor tells them what to do and what not to do. And there can be no criminal charges laid. When they say there are enough laws, they must tell us. We've been waiting for them. They should have gone to lay charges against all those things they've been watching on television. They haven't been to the police station even once. At least we've been there. They say we must interdict people. We would be in court every day. It's because they wait for things to be on television. We don't. We go out there and monitor the system every day, literally.
Did you come across a similar complaint like the one Satoko is talking about?
Oh, lots of them, actually. You see, when the city gives permission for someone to have a church, they assume it's on a Sunday. We've had complaints from townships across the country where children can't study. They can't do anything because someone has put up a tent there and it's high volume from Monday till Sunday. People can't sleep. They walk like zombies. And you say the things have changed. The dynamics have changed. The rules of the city cannot control the system anymore because people's lives are being violated. Forza will say, let the city enforce the rules. The rules, the bylaws, did not foresee this thing of Monday to Sunday. When you want to open a church, the normal thing that we all think of is that, okay, Sunday between 9 and 3 at the worst, they'll be singing. But we never foresaw a stage where people's lives are disrupted completely. You need new answers, new solutions for new problems. They can't hold on to their freedom till people die. And we're facing death. If this thing continues, we'll have mass suicides in this country.
Michael, first of all, I've got a call on the line, but I want to come to you first. When you say there are enough laws to deal with these things, you probably mean extortion and fraud and all those kind of things. Is that what you mean? Because this is what is happening is close to extortion.
We live in a very well-regulated legal framework. I'm deeply saddened to hear the lady guest that you have on was treated so badly. But again, if you listen to what happened to her, she was manhandled. That's an assault. She was verbally abused. That is an assault on her dignity. In other situations where you see people being jumped on, that is an assault. It is inaccurate to say that the person who the crime, if you like, is being committed hasn't got the ability to file a report. First of all, the state has a responsibility to intervene when citizens are being harmed. You can't say that if the victim agrees to be harmed, then the state can do nothing. That would be absurd. Think of a situation of, for example, euthanasia, where, to give you an extreme example to make the point, where somebody is saying, I want somebody to kill me. Well, if somebody goes ahead and obliges and kills that person, they are unable to stand behind the defense and say, well, the person agreed to the crime.
But
no.
Do you agree with me that some of the actions of these churches amounts to extortion and fraud?
If it amounts to extortion and fraud, then the question is, why is the law enforcement agency so remiss as to not follow through and to bring charges and to bring these people to book? Let's take this call from Louisa from Johannesburg. Louisa, good afternoon. And Louisa from Johannesburg. Good afternoon.
Hello.
Welcome to hello.
Hello, it's actually Lungisa. Michael, I think Michael needs to explain how regulation can infringe on the right of religion. He needs to tell us that fully and explain that. Because I totally agree with regulation. However, where I do not agree with the recommendation that we put forward is on. I think if we just focus on the recommendations, but there's an overarching issue here that, for example, if foreigners can come and go in this country and do whatever that they want and open churches and stuff like that, I think what they need to do as well, they need to put a recommendation that speaks to Home Affairs in controlling the borders, or if a person is here to open a church, for example, is it possible then that those people should be required to have visas in order to come to South Africa? As well as the issue.
Thank you, Lungisa. Let me come back to you, Satoko. One of the questions I want to know is, how far is this case with Pastor Elijah? Now, I see you're holding court documents there.
Yes. Okay. Can I show this to the camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Just talk us through how far is this case.
All right. Okay. City of Johannesburg got this document from the Johannesburg High Court, 13th of June. This is not really court order, but I believe this is called court motion. Yes. According to the content of this document, within 30 days from 13th of June, Pastor Elijah, number one, must be able to rehabilitate the walls destroyed inside his flat. Number two, he must be able to stop all the church-related activities.
Is this happening? Has he started doing this?
Okay, number two is okay now. Looks like he has disappeared and his followers disappeared. But every time I check his flat, no rehabilitation started, not at all.
Madam Chair, this is exactly the kind of thing you are trying to look at, because now that law enforcement has come in, they disappeared.
You see, that's the thing about this problem we're faced with. It's very nebulous, it's very touch and feel, it's here and there. And we're saying there is no law in this country that says, as a practitioner, you must be registered somewhere. People estimate that we have over 100,000 churches in this country. Unregistered pastors. When FOSA says it's an overreach, doctors register, lawyers register. The Constitution is very clear. You have a right to practice your trade, your occupation, your profession, but it may be regulated by law. That's the Bill of Rights. And we are saying this is a profession. Where we differ with them is that the calling to be a doctor is a calling. Everything is a calling. But you need to have
to be a pastor is a calling.
Yes.
That's what they say.
Yes, to be a pastor is also a calling, but it doesn't mean you can't be regulated. You must run wide. And it also says the CRL is a state institution because we are appointed by the president. So are the judges. So it means no one can preside over matters of the church because we are all state and now we are interfering with godly matters. We are saying their peers must manage these people. It's a peer review mechanism, but we're saying as a Chapter 9 institution, the Constitution said protect religious communities. It didn't say protect pastors and reverends. We're protecting congregants. They are protecting pastors and reverends and other people. We are in defense of those poor people whose money is being taken every day, whose human dignity is being violated every day, where the laws, as we are told by the police and the NPA, will not apply. He says, if you see a pastor jumping on a participant in a church of law, you can go to the police station and say, Pastor Mgun was jumping on his people. And the people will be his defense when he gets to court, that actually I want him to jump on me even today as we speak.
I want Michael, I wanted to respond to some of the issues put to you by the chairperson, but I want to take this call from Theo from Johannesburg. Theo, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Okay, good afternoon. How are you, Mateza?
Fine, thanks. How are you, ma'am?
Fine. Yes, I'm watching, I'm listening. But from the word of the Lord, originally, we as human beings, we are given the sense of discrimination on our own, discernment. Now, all the people, congregates, believers, Christians, before we can do anything, before we are church people, already God has given us the intelligence. Is that what is happening is not what is supposed to happen. According to the word of the Lord, people are serving a God of order, the supernatural working God. The supernatural is not being done by pushing, shoving people. I'm very sorry for Mrs. Matangu, who was pushed by a man of God. I'm not hearing or witnessing Mrs. Matangu being pushed. At one stage, one pastor pushed one old frail woman in a church where we were. And then what? My son has to intervene and help to help the old woman who was being pushed out of the church by a pastor.
Thank you very much. Let's give Michael some time to respond. I think, Michael, there was something said by Lungisa earlier, and also some of the things that the chairperson is saying. What do you say to those things? Do you think these things are right? We should allow people to do as they wish because we have a constitution that allows that?
No, obviously not. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, these are the very situations that the lady who you have as the guest, she is using legal recourse to redress the issues, and that is the right way to do it. What the CRL chairperson is proposing, or the CRL report is proposing, is that peer review committees are set up to basically evaluate whether umbrella organizations are able to operate, and what they're going to be doing, among other things, is to look to see whether the religious doctrine that they are prescribing is acceptable and whether they can have the capacity to keep people on, I think the wording is, the right spiritual path. Now, here's the danger.
My apologies. I read the report and I never came across the commission saying they want to intervene in terms of the doctrine. The doctrine belongs to the churches, but what they are saying, a peer review mechanism must be in place so that it is the peers that say this is not what we want. For instance, let's take a case that is in court presently, the case of Pastor Omutoso. And many of the religious communities, pastors stood up and said, we don't understand why this has happened in this church. So that's the kind of thing the commission is asking for. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, no, but I think what you did, and I would appreciate being given the opportunity to finish. The peer review committees are described in the report by the CRL Commission as advisory panels to the CRL itself. The CRL has declared that it is the final arbiter of religion. Now, when you see that these peer review committees are actually, in a sense, answerable to and supported by, staffed by, and have to report directly back to the CRL Rights Commission, who themselves ultimately will take those decisions, then what you're seeing is really a great overreach by the CRL Commission, because they were never, ever empowered or intended by either the Constitution or the CRL Act to have executive authority. They are an advisory body, they are an investigatory body, they may keep a register, which I'm think everybody would be perfectly happy with, of religious practitioners in the country. But what they're saying is that this is not a register that they're keeping. They're saying that they will have the power to license any and all religious practitioners in the country. And that is a big difference between having my name and address on a database. That is having the ability to decide according to my religious doctrine, because that is one of the criteria that the peer review commission will be evaluating, whether or not I can teach or preach religion. And that is an overreach of their authority.
Let me come back to the studio. Madam Chair, you also had you had to also go to court. You were taken to court by one of the pastors.
Yes, but I think I shouldn't allow him to get away with this issue of doctrine. Because nowhere in the report, I'll ask him to go read the report. What we're saying as the CRL Rights Commission is that right now we have these powers. We are devolving the powers to the sector itself to monitor itself. And if a pastor has been disciplined through that process, we have the right to monitor whether they follow due process, all the laws of the country in terms of the other party and all sorts of other principles have been followed. That is when we'll say, no, you did not follow procedure, so we can't take this advice you are giving us. But the reality of the matter is, once we take that decision, we will write to the relevant pastor and say, your peers say they've tried everything with you. Now we're removing you from the register. That's why you can't take a license you haven't given. You need to give it first, the right to preach, so that when you do something wrong, we've got something to take away from you. That's what FOSA is saying is not right. You must have a right to preach even if you're killing people, it's fine. And secondly, the issue of doctrine is not part of the deal. It's about the professional. The person who's in front of the people is not God. He's not Jesus. He's not the Holy Spirit. He's an individual who chose a particular career. And they are saying that career cannot be regulated. Let the doctors be regulated. Let everybody be regulated. We answer to God in heaven. We are saying we will defend people no matter what it costs, no matter what it takes, within the Constitution. The Constitution has limitations in Section 36 that they don't want to deal with. They mustn't put things that are not in the report. I will ask Mr. Swain to go and read thoroughly. And if he has a problem, we are willing to workshop them for free.
I just want to go back to, we have our guest on the line. We have Mr. Hangwani Mulaudzi from the Hawks on the line. And I wouldn't like to keep him long. Mr. Hangwani Mulaudzi, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you for having us. Good afternoon to your guest as well.
Angwani, there's been several complaints, especially about the Hawks' reluctance in pursuing cases brought by South Africans against rogue pastors, especially foreign pastors and even our local pastors. What's happened to those cases? I know you are following some of them.
Well, there are cases that have been brought to us by the chair, Omam Kaluva, that we are investigating in Gauteng. The matters have now been referred to the NPA. There's an SPP, of course, who is looking into those issues. We just are waiting his report in terms of whether they are going to enroll these cases to court or we still have to do more in terms of our investigations. But I have been following this discussion as well, Mateza, in terms of Omam Kaluva, where she mentioned the fact that, some of these cases are very difficult to even investigate. The mandate of the DPCI of the Hawks is totally different from that of the SAPS. We need to, from our point of view, I think there is a need for us to be able to work in a multidisciplinary approach where we bring in other entities, your FSBs, your South African Revenue Services, ourselves, maybe the Human Rights Commission as well, in order to see how can we be able to deal with these matters, more especially because it is true that most of these churches are not being regulated, and we are talking about illicit financial flows that are actually being committed here. It's about time that we need to sit down and see how best we can come with regulations or look into the law itself as to if there are monies that are being taken out of the country, or the banks themselves, they might come to the party as well, because most of these churches, they bank with our local banks, but there's money that is just coming in. Sometimes you find that there's a large amount of money that goes out of the country. What is this money going out for? So this is critical that we need to do something, and I think this matter is receiving attention from our side as well.
I know you might not be able to answer that. Probably you can try. I won't hang you if you do not. But the question is, the chairperson here has raised the issues that when they go to police, they are told there is no law that says, we don't know under which law should we charge these people. But surely there are issues of fraud. There are issues of what's the term I used earlier? Extortion that is happening here, and surely those are cases that should be answered.
Look, it's true. It's very difficult in the sense that there should be an element of crime that is brought to our attention. We normally deal with our own sources, or there are people who might come as a whistleblower and give us information, and that is where we'll be able to open up an inquiry. That inquiry, after having been investigated, we will then be able to go and open a proper docket looking at this issues that have been raised. People go to church. It's true, people are being stamped on, people are being doomed and all those kinds of things. But when you take these issues, even if we see them on TV, then you take them to court, the same person will then turn around and say, I did this out of my own will. You know, and that is where the problem is. And it's true that it's very difficult for the police to police these issues in church. But if someone and if somebody is willing to give us information, we are able to deal with these issues, like what we did with Mam Kaluva's case that she has raised with us. So we can say that our hands are tied because people are unwilling to come forward. I don't know whether they are afraid, but at the same time, I think that is why I'm saying it needs us to work in a more disciplinary, multidisciplinary approach, where all these entities that I have mentioned before can work in tandem in terms of making sure that if we find that there is an element of extortion, if it's found that there's an element of fraud that is being committed by these churches, we are able to deal with. Let me give an example of matters. There was a church that was in Johannesburg. This church, we closed it down sometime. I can't just remember the name of the church. This church was being used as a drug den where drugs were being sent. But here we are talking about a church. So those are the issues that somebody came to us and gave us that information, and we managed to get those drugs as well. So the people now are in jail. They are being, the case is being dealt with in court. So these are the things that we are also looking at, not only looking at the money flow, but most of these are sort of a front of some sort of thing that we need to investigate. But like I said, it is critical that people who believe and have got the courage to give us that information, we will be able to deal with these cases.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Ngwane Mulaudzi. You've actually answered all our questions. We don't have to ask you more questions. Thank you for coming on and give us that information about what exactly the chairperson is talking about here. You must be happy to hear that.
Well, we're very happy to hear that, but we also want to follow up on what he said, that there are no complainants, that the same people the pastor is jumping on will get to court and be witnesses for the pastor, saying they were willing participants. Then the criminal justice system cracks at that point. Some of the people, the thing that took us to the peer review committee proposal, some of the people said to us, those that came to complain to us confidentially, they said if there had been a group of other religious people that we could have discussed this matter with. I'll give you another example, and fortunately it's prime time viewing, where the pastor would say, sleep with me, and whatever I pass on to you during this action will heal you. They voluntarily sleep with the pastor. So there's no sexual violation. It's all consensual. And then people realize later on that there was a problem. They are no longer willing to go to the police to say there was a sexual violation. But they would have been able to go to a group of religious leaders who will understand what happened at that point when she believed something that the police don't deal with those kinds of faith and religious issues. Hence we're saying there'll be more people who come forward. The allegations that you've raised about Pastor Omotoso, the allegations are that they've been going on for quite a long time. Those are the allegations. But if there had been a place of religious people that maybe these young people would have gone to say.
To confide.
Yes, to confide. Because, you know, the issue of churches, confessions, there are all those spaces that are safe that you need to create for people. What FOSA is saying is that let them go to court and explain their stories there. We are saying this is a faith-based process and it needs to be handed over to senior faith-based people who can then protect.
That's actually a suggestion that came from Pastor Sono.
Yes.
So Toko, what are all the other residents in Yeovil, in your flat, also together with you in this action?
Yes, I would say yes, they don't like to have a charge of that nature, but I must say their willingness to help it's really various from one person to another person. So it was quite hard sometimes to find somebody just like work together with me, just like comrades. But anyway, I hope I'm answering your question.
Okay, Satoko, don't worry. Let me go down to Michael down in Cape Town. Michael, the information that we got from Brigadier Hangwani Mulaudzi is probably that's the kind of thing you'd like to see.
Absolutely. When we see the law enforced and when we see the law applied, then we see these problems being dealt with. I would just like to pick back, though, up on one of the things that the chair lady said, because she said that there was nothing in the report that said that the peer review committee, which I say reports directly back to the CRL and is answerable to it and will be staffed and resourced by it, that it has nothing to do with regulating religion. And I'm going to just read a particular quote. It says from their report that they would set minimum standards of good governance, ethics, and acceptable religious practices as per their religious doctrine. And then it goes on to say, and they must ensure that a member of the umbrella organization remains on a good spiritual path. Now, as soon as you hear that, you cannot but realize that this must involve the state, which is the CRL, because they are a state institution, actually deciding what is or is not acceptable from a religious context. And that's fundamentally a dangerous place to be. It is an unconstitutional place to be. We never agree.
My apologies, Michael, my apologies. We'll agree to disagree on this, but let me give the final word to the chairperson.
I think what FOSA needs to do is to be realistic about what is happening in the country. We all as a nation need to start saying, this can't continue anymore. If we don't deal with this thing with the urgency it deserves, this thing will spiral out of control. People are going to die, and the state will be responsible for those deaths, and not an NGO called FOSA. So we are saying, let them
in Nigeria.
Yes, let them do what needs to be done and inform themselves about what is happening on the ground, how people are being abused, how people are being exploited, how people participate in their own oppression willingly. Then we can have a conversation with them once they get to that stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this discussion. It was a riveting discussion. We can continue this discussion the whole week, but surely we can't solve all those problems here in the studio. Oh God, our faith in ages past. The Reverend Dr. Alan H. Anderson says, and I quote, "There are not always instant solutions to life's vicissitudes, and spirituality is not to be measured in terms of success. People are not only convinced by the triumphs of Christianity, but also by its trials. The Holy Spirit is also a gentle dove, a spirit of humility, patience and meekness, of love, joy and peace. Our Christian faith must not only provide power when there is lack of it, but must also sustain us through life's tragedies and failures, and especially especially when there is no visible success. This has been Rights and Recourse. This program is, the views expressed of this program, not necessarily those of the SABC. The program is repeated at 5 on Monday morning. From all of us, you can find us on YouTube, and you can always continue tweeting at Rights Recourse. From all of us in the studio, thank you to our guests, and goodbye.